The Winfield Mansion loomed like a forgotten monument to despair, its once proud walls now cloaked in ivy and shadows. Perched on the edge of a wooded hill, overlooking the cold, gray waters of the river below, it was a place that had long since lost its luster. The townspeople rarely spoke of it, and when they did, it was with a shudder or a hasty crossing of themselves. There were whispers of curses and madness, of a family consumed by its own secrets, of things that lurked in the dark corners of those grand, decaying rooms. It had been years since anyone had lived there, and even longer since the mansion had been alive with the sound of laughter and music. Now, it stood like an old, abandoned stage, the curtains drawn, waiting for an audience that would never come. But those who dared to venture near the mansion at night would swear they could still hear something. A faint sobbing, the soft murmur of a woman's voice carried on the wind, like a half-remembered lullaby turned to lament. The Winfield family had been one of the most prominent in the region, their wealth and influence a pillar of the community. The patriarch, Charles Winfield, had made his fortune in the shipping trade, and in his twilight years, he had decided to build a grand home for his beloved wife, Eleanor, and their daughter, Emily. The mansion was to be a symbol of his success, a legacy to pass down through generations. But it had become something else entirely, a place of sorrow and despair. It began with Emily, the young and beautiful daughter who was the pride and joy of the Winfield family. She was known for her raven black hair, her porcelain skin, and eyes that seemed to look straight through a person, as if she could see into their very soul. She was engaged to a young man named Henry Davenport, a handsome and charming fellow from a respected family. The engagement was celebrated by all, and the mansion was filled with light and joy as preparations for the wedding began. But then, on the eve of her wedding day, Emily disappeared. The entire household was thrown into chaos. Servants searched the grounds, townspeople combed the nearby woods, but she was nowhere to be found. Her bridal gown, a stunning creation of silk and lace, lay neatly folded on her bed, untouched. Her fiancé Henry was beside himself with grief, refusing to leave the mansion, insisting that she must be found. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no sign of her. Charles and Eleanor, devastated, became reclusive, shunning the outside world. Rumors began to spread through the town that Emily had run away, that she had been kidnapped, or worse. But there was another story, one whispered in secret, that she had been driven mad by something she had seen in the mansion. Something terrible, something that no one else had seen. And then, after nearly a month, Emily returned. She appeared one stormy night at the front door, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes wide with a haunted look. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn and muddy. She did not speak as the servants rushed to her side, guiding her into the warmth of the house. When her mother saw her, she gasped and clutched at her heart, as if she had seen a ghost. "Emily, my darling, where have you been?" she cried, tears streaming down her face. But Emily said nothing. She simply stood there, staring ahead, her lips moving soundlessly. For days she did not utter a word. She seemed to be in a trance, her body present, but her mind somewhere far away. Henry tried to reach her, to hold her, but she recoiled, her eyes filling with a fear that he could not understand. She would sit for hours staring at the walls, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the air, her mouth twitching as if she were speaking to someone only she could see. At night, the servants would hear her wandering the halls, her footsteps soft and slow, her voice a faint murmur. Sometimes they would hear her weeping, a sound so mournful it chilled the blood in their veins. One night, Henry decided he could take no more. He had to know what had happened to his beloved. He confronted Emily in her room, demanding that she tell him where she had been, what she had seen. For a moment, her eyes seemed to clear, her gaze meeting his with a sudden intensity. "The shadows," she whispered. "They told me secrets, secrets I was never meant to know." Before he could ask her what she meant, a gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candle he held. In the darkness, he felt a cold hand grip his arm, and a voice, not Emily's, but a low, guttural sound, whispered in his ear, "Leave or suffer." Henry fled the room, his face white as a sheet. He left the mansion that night, never to return. Days later, his body was found floating in the river, his face frozen in a mask of terror. Emily grew more erratic after that. her behavior becoming more and more unsettling. She would stare into mirrors for hours, her fingers caressing the glass as if it were a living thing. She began to write on the walls, strange symbols and words that no one could understand. She spoke of them, the shadows that had shown her things, terrible things, things that she could never forget. One morning, the servants found her in the drawing room, slumped in a chair, her face serene. She was dead, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips, her hands folded neatly in her lap. A single word was scratched into the wood of the chair beneath her. Freed. After Emily's death, the mansion began to change. At first, it was subtle, a cold draft where there should have been warmth, the faint sound of footsteps when no one was around. Then, it grew more intense. Servants began to report strange figures in the corners of their eyes, shadows that moved when they should not have. Objects would shift on their own, doors would slam shut with no wind, and always, there was the sound of a woman sobbing. Eleanor, already frail with grief, could not bear it. She died within a year, found in her bed with her hands clutching a locket that had once belonged to Emily. Charles, alone and broken, locked himself away, his health failing. He became a ghost of a man, wandering the halls, muttering to himself about shadows and secrets. He was found dead one cold winter morning, his eyes wide open, staring at a spot on the ceiling where nothing could be seen. And so, the mansion was abandoned. The townspeople spoke of it only in whispers, of the shadows that moved behind the windows, of the faint sobbing that could be heard on quiet nights, carried on the wind. No one dared to go near it, for they all knew that something dark lingered there, something that had been awakened the night Emily disappeared. The Winfield Mansion still stands, its walls silent, its rooms empty, but not quite. For those who pass by at night, they swear they can hear the faint echo of a woman's voice, singing a song that no one can quite remember, a lullaby turned to a lament. The shadows still whisper, and the house still waits, with secrets locked behind its doors, secrets that no one dares to uncover.